Eli Brandt counted $47 on the kitchen table and did the math for the third time. Same answer. It was always the same answer. His mother's next chemo cycle cost more than he made in 3 months, and there was no version of the numbers where $47 became $47,000. He sat there anyway. He counted it again. Because sitting there was easier than walking into the next room and letting her see his face. He did not let her see him cry. Not in the house. He did that in the truck, in the shop lot, with the door shut and the radio off. Then the phone call came. The billing office of Meridian Health Assurance put him on speakerphone in a lobby with 6 people waiting in line behind him, and a woman he would never meet read him a sentence off a screen. Ma'am's plan lapsed on the 3rd. We can't authorize the infusion without payment up front. $47,200 owed. 21 days before the oncologist stopped the cycle. 6 strangers heard all of it, and Eli just stood there and said thank you, because his mother raised him to say thank you. That night, the hospice nurse who sat with his mother every Thursday slid a folded county clerk form across that same kitchen table, and she said 4 words he didn't understand yet. If you believe love is built with 2 pairs of hands, this story is for you. Before we go on, subscribe and comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. Now let me tell you about the coffee pot, because that's really where this starts. Ruth Brandt kept a blue enamel coffee pot on the back of the stove. It had white speckles worn thin around the handle and a dent on one side from a move she couldn't remember making. It was older than Eli. Some mornings it was the loudest thing in the house, that low percolator knock, steady as a second heartbeat. She made coffee in it every Thursday. Only Thursday. Because Thursday was the day the nurse came. The house was small, rented in Kettering Falls, Ohio, a town where the water tower still had the high school's year painted on it from before Eli was born. 2 bedrooms, a porch that sagged on the left, a kitchen where the linoleum curled up at one corner, and Ruth had put a chair leg on it so nobody would trip. She'd been fixing that corner with a chair leg for 11 years. Eli worked at the diesel shop out on Route 4. He worked doubles when Marcus let him, and lately Marcus let him every time. He'd sold his motorcycle in the spring, a '78 shovelhead he'd rebuilt himself, piece by piece, over 2 winters. He didn't talk about it. He put the money toward a copay, and he told his mother the bike had a cracked frame and wasn't worth keeping. She knew he was lying. She let him lie. That was a thing they did for each other now. They let each other lie about small things, so the big thing had a little room to breathe. He was 31. His hands were always half black at the knuckles, no matter how hard he scrubbed. He had a way of standing in a doorway before he came into a room, like he was checking the weather in there first. He'd learned that this year. You learn to read a sick person's room from the doorway. You learn whether it's a good day before you say good morning, so you can match her. Ruth was 63. Ovarian cancer. She'd been a lunch lady at the elementary for 22 years, and half the town had eaten her tuna casserole in the 3rd grade, and she reminded them of it constantly. She was funny in a dry, quiet way that surprised people. She was fighting hard. Everybody said so. What nobody said out loud, what Eli knew and pretended not to know, was that she wasn't fighting for herself. She was fighting so that when it was over, her boy wouldn't be standing in an empty house with black knuckles. Alone, that was the whole thing. That was what she wanted more than she wanted to live. She just never would have said it that way. Cora Nilsen came on Thursdays. She was 34, a hospice nurse with the county, and she'd been coming for 2 months. She drove a gray Corolla that made a noise Eli had diagnosed from the porch on her 2nd visit. A wheel bearing, going, maybe 6 weeks left in it. She parked it in the same spot every week, angled a little, like she was in a hurry that never showed on her face. She was good at her job in a way that was almost invisible. That was the thing about her. She'd be sitting with Ruth, and you wouldn't notice she'd changed the sheets, refilled the water, checked the meds, and written 3 things in a folder, because none of it made a sound. She talked low. She listened more than she talked. She had a habit of tucking her hair behind one ear with the back of her wrist when her hands were full, which they always were. Ruth liked her. Ruth, who did not warm up to people fast, had warmed up to Cora inside a month. She made the coffee for her, in the blue pot. She'd have Eli carry 2 cups out to the porch when the weather was decent, and the 2 women would sit out there while Eli pretended to have something to fix in the yard, and he'd hear his mother laugh, actually laugh, for the first time in a week. He didn't think much about Cora beyond that. She was the nurse. She was the person who made his mother laugh on Thursdays and kept her comfortable. And he was grateful to her the way you're grateful to a good mechanic or a good teacher. From a distance, with respect and a wall. Then Meridian denied the infusion, and the wall didn't matter anymore because everything went sideways at once. It was the lapsed plan thing. Ruth had a policy through her old district retiree pool. Somewhere in the paperwork, a premium had gone unpaid, $61 it turned out, a bank draft that failed when the district switched processors, and Meridian used that failed $61 draft to say the whole plan had lapsed on the 3rd of the month. Retroactively, which meant the chemo cycle Ruth had already started, wasn't covered, which meant the next infusion wouldn't happen without $47,000 up front, which Eli did not have and could not get, and both of them knew it. He spent a week on the phone. He learned the words: retroactive termination, grace period, reinstatement review. He filled out the reinstatement forms in the shop office on his lunch with a pen that kept dying, and he mailed them. And he called to confirm they got them, and a different person each time told him it was in review and to call back. 21 days. The oncologist's office was kind about it and firm about it, which was worse than if they'd just been cold. The doctor herself called and said, "Eli, I will do everything I can, but I cannot administer a cycle we have no authorization for, and I need you to understand the timeline." He understood the timeline. The timeline lived behind his eyes now, counting down, even in his sleep. He didn't tell Ruth the number. He told her it was being sorted out. She let him lie. Cora heard it anyway. Because Cora was in the house on Thursday, and Ruth told her everything, it turned out, more than she told her own son. And Cora sat at the kitchen table that evening after Ruth had gone to sleep, and she waited for Eli to come in from the shop. He came in at 9, greased to the elbows. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her still there, her coat on the back of the chair, a folder in front of her, the blue coffee pot cold on the stove. "She's asleep," Cora said. "Good day, actually," she ate. "Thank you." He went to the sink, started scrubbing. "You didn't have to stay. I wanted to talk to you. About the coverage." His shoulders went up an inch. He kept scrubbing. "It's being handled." "It's not, though," she said it gently. Not unkind, just true, the way she said everything. I read the denial. "Eli, that's not a paperwork mix-up they're going to fix in 21 days. That's a wall. I've seen this exact wall maybe 40 times. It doesn't move because you push on it." He turned the water off, stood with his back to her a second. "Then what do you want me to do with that? I want to tell you something, and I want you to not answer right away." And that's when she took the folded form out of the folder and slid it across the table. He came over and looked at it and didn't understand it. A county form. Boxes. 2 lines at the bottom for 2 names. "It's an application for a marriage license," Cora said. He looked at her like she'd spoken another language. "I'm a full-time nurse with the county hospital system," she said. "I carry the good plan, the spousal and family plan. If I marry you, your mother becomes household family under my coverage. Different insurer, clean enrollment, no lapse for them to point at. It covers the infusions. It covers most of what's coming. The gap that's left, I cover, quietly, and nobody ever has to know the size of it." She folded her hands. "No strings. I sleep on the couch. It's a legal arrangement to move a wall that won't move any other way. That's all it is." Eli was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the refrigerator kicked on and hummed and shut off again. "No," he said. Eli, no, he wasn't angry. That was the strange part. His voice was low and flat and almost apologetic. I can't take that. You can't marry a stranger and pay for a stranger's mother. People don't do that. There's got to be a catch, and I don't want to find out what it is in 6 months. No, there's no catch. There's always a catch." He rubbed his face with the back of his wrist and left a smear. "I appreciate it. I mean that. But I've been carrying this myself, and I'm going to keep carrying it myself. I'm not going to be a man who let a woman he barely knows marry him to pay his bills. I can't. I couldn't live in my own skin." Cora didn't argue. She just looked at him, and there was something in her face he'd see again later and understand better. A kind of tired patience, like she'd already had this argument in her own head from his side and lost. "Sit down, Elias." Neither of them had heard the door. Ruth stood in the hallway in her robe, holding the frame, thinner than the robe, her hair gone to a soft gray fuzz under the scarf she slept in. She'd heard most of it, maybe all of it. "Ma, you should sit down." She came to the table slow, and Cora was up and had the chair for her before Eli could move, and that told him something too. How naturally she did it, hands already knowing where a body wanted to be. Ruth sat. She caught her breath. She put one hand flat on the marriage form, like she was warming it. "You listen to me," she said. "I have watched you sell everything you love. You sold that motorcycle you built with your own 2 hands, and you looked me in the eye and told me it had a bad frame. It did not have a bad frame. You have worked yourself down to bone for me, and I have let you. Because your pride is the only thing you've got left that they can't take, and I didn't want to be the one to take it either." Her voice shook and held. "But I am not going to die 20 days from now because my son was too proud to let somebody help. I won't do it. You hear me? That's the one thing I won't do for you." The kitchen was very quiet. "She's offering," Ruth said. "A grown woman with her own mind is offering. It's not pity. Look at her. That is not a woman offering pity. So you're going to stop deciding what other people are allowed to give, and you're going to let this happen, and you're going to say thank you the way I taught you." Eli looked at Cora. Cora looked at the table. "Thank you," he said. It came out rough. That was how it started. Not with a yes. With a mother refusing to let her son bury her over $61. They went to the county clerk on a Tuesday. It took 60 seconds. There was no ring. Cora wore a gray sweater, and Eli wore the one collared shirt he owned that still buttoned at the neck, and a woman named Deb, who'd known Ruth for 30 years, pronounced them married, and looked like she wanted to ask 100 questions and didn't ask a single one. They signed. They drove back separately, because Cora had a shift. Somewhere in those first days, small and unpressed, Cora said a thing at the kitchen table that nobody picked up. They were going over what the new coverage would and wouldn't handle, and there was a gap, and Eli started to tighten up again, and Cora said, "Easy as anything, don't. I've got money sitting in an account I've never touched. It should go to something. This is a something." And she moved on to the next line on the page like she hadn't said it. Eli let it go. It didn't seem like the kind of thing you asked about. A person says they have some savings. You don't interrogate it. He filed it under things nurses probably have and forgot it. He would remember it later. He would remember it and feel the floor drop out. But not yet. Right then, it was just a sentence, thrown away, that neither of them held. The first real thing she did, the first thing that made Eli see her instead of the nurse, was the medication schedule. Ruth hadn't slept through a night in weeks. She'd wake at 2, at 4, in pain or in nausea, or just in that gray dread that comes at those hours. And Eli would hear her and get up and sit with her, and neither of them would sleep. And he'd go to the shop at 7 anyway, with his eyes full of sand. He thought that was just how it was now. He thought sleep was one of the things the disease had taken and wasn't giving back. Cora took the shoebox of prescriptions and the discharge sheets and Ruth's own scattered notes, and she sat at the table one evening and rebuilt the whole schedule from the ground up. She moved the anti-nausea med earlier. She stacked two things that were fighting each other 3 hours apart instead of together. She added a small dose of something at bedtime that the hospital had listed, but nobody had ever actually started. She wrote it all out in a clean grid in block letters and taped it inside the cabinet door. Ruth slept 8 hours that night, straight through. Eli got up at 2 out of habit, stood in the hallway, and heard nothing. Just his mother breathing, slow and even, the way she used to before any of this. He stood there in the dark for a long time. Then he went back to bed, and, for the first night in he couldn't remember how long, he slept too. The next morning, he found Cora had stayed on the couch, gone before he woke. But she'd left the pot ready to go on the stove. He looked at that blue pot, and he said her name out loud in the empty kitchen, testing it. Cora, not the nurse. Cora. It landed different. It landed like a person he owed something to that wasn't money. He started calling her Cora after that. Ruth noticed. Ruth noticed everything. Then came the Sunday, and the Sunday nearly broke it. Ruth had a good stretch, 3 days on the new schedule, where she felt more herself than she had all season. And she wanted people. She wanted her sister and her nieces and the Hensleys from next door and old Pastor Doyle. And she wanted a real Sunday dinner in the house, even if she could only sit up for an hour of it. So they did it. Cora cooked most of it, quietly the way she did everything, and Eli carried chairs. And by 2 o'clock the little house was full of the smell of pot roast and the noise of a family that hadn't been all in one room since the funeral of Ruth's husband 4 years back. It was good for about an hour. Ruth held court from the good chair with a blanket over her knees, and people laughed. And the blue coffee pot went around the table hand to hand, filling cups, and for a little while it felt like a house where nobody was dying. Then Eli went to the kitchen for more rolls, and he heard it through the doorway. His cousin Randy, who'd had 2 beers and always had one opinion too many, talking low to Ruth's brother-in-law, but not low enough. You know he married the hospice lady for the insurance, right? That's what that is. That's the whole thing. Marry the nurse, get the coverage. Smart, I guess. But come on. Eli stood in the kitchen with a plate of rolls and felt his whole face go hot. It wasn't the shame for himself. He could have taken that. It was the shame for her. Cora was 6 feet away at the sink, up to her wrists in dishwater. And she'd heard it. He saw her hear it. Saw the small, still moment before she reached for the next plate. And she just kept washing. She didn't turn around. She didn't defend herself. She washed the plate and set it in the rack and reached for the next one. And something about the straightness of her back, the way she'd clearly done this before, been talked about before, decided long ago that dignity meant not turning around. Something about it made Eli want to put the plate of rolls through the wall. He almost ended it right there. He almost walked into that dining room and said, "We're done. This was a mistake," and dissolved the whole thing to spare her the whispering. He got as far as the doorway. Ruth beat him to it. She'd heard Randy too. And Ruth, who could barely stand, sat up straight in the good chair and said, in a voice that shut the whole room, "Randy Kessler. That woman washing my dishes right now got up at 4 in the morning 3 times this week to keep me out of the hospital. She married my son so I could have the medicine that's letting me sit here and look at your ungrateful face. You want to call that a scheme? You can call it that from your own house." And then, quieter, to the whole table, 2 people are keeping me alive with their 4 hands. You'll speak about them in this house with respect, or you'll drink your coffee somewhere else. Nobody said anything. Randy went red. And Cora, at the sink, finally stopped washing, just for a second, and pressed the back of her wet wrist to her mouth. And Eli was the only one who saw it. The coffee pot went around again. Somebody refilled Ruth's cup. The afternoon closed itself back up over the moment. But something had changed in Eli, standing in that doorway with a plate of rolls. He'd been ready to protect his pride by ending it. Instead, he'd watched his dying mother protect Cora when he'd frozen. He put the rolls down. He walked over to the sink and picked up a towel and started drying, next to her, in front of everybody. And he didn't say a word about it, and neither did she. But they did the dishes side by side while the family watched. And that was its own kind of answer. That week her car finally died. The wheel bearing he'd heard going for 2 months let go in the grocery lot, and she called the house, embarrassed. And Eli drove out with the shop truck and towed the gray Corolla in after hours and put it up on the lift himself. She came to the shop while he worked, sat on an upturned bucket with a cup from the gas station, and watched. It was late, the bay quiet, just the one drop light, and the tick of the cooling engine and Eli's ratchet. He didn't mind being watched. Most people fidgeted when they watched a man work. She didn't. She sat there easy. And after a while she said, "You love this. I can tell. You go somewhere when you're doing it." "It makes sense," he said from under the car. "You find what's wrong, you fix it, it's fixed. It stays fixed." He was quiet a beat. "Not a lot of that lately." "No," she said. "Not a lot of that." He fixed the bearing, and while he was in there he did the brakes she'd been putting off, and a belt that was cracking, and he didn't charge her for any of it, and wouldn't hear about it. That was his one card, and he played it hard. She let him. That was the trade they were learning. She carried the big impossible thing, the money, the wall, and she let him carry the small human things, the car, the towing, the fixing, so he could still be a man who provided something. She figured that out about him faster than he figured it out about himself. Afterward, they sat at the kitchen table with all the household's paper spread out. The bills, the coverage grid, the shop schedule, Ruth's appointments, and they put it in order together. Not romantic. The opposite of romantic. Two people building a system to keep a third person alive. But there's a kind of intimacy in that too, in learning how another person's mind works. Watching her make a column, and total it, and circle a due date, hearing how she talked to a billing office on the phone, calm and relentless, never once raising her voice, and never once backing down. Partners, not in love. Partners, it was more than most married people ever got, and neither of them called it anything. Then came the bad night, the one that welded them. It was 3 weeks in. Ruth spiked a fever at 11:30. Eli knew the number that mattered. Cora had drilled it into him, and it climbed past it while he stood there with the thermometer, and his hands started to shake. He called for Cora, and she was already up, already moving, and what happened over the next 5 hours he would never forget as long as he lived, because it was the first time he saw the two of them work as one thing. She ran it like a drill and pulled him into it so he couldn't panic. Cold cloths, the neck and wrists. Get the port line ready. No, watch me. You'll need to know this. She taught him the port line right there at midnight because she needed a second pair of hands, and there was no one else. And his big grease-stained hands that had never done anything gentler than seat a bearing learned to handle the line clean, following her voice, her hands over his once to show him the angle. They got fluids in. They got the fever meds in. They watched the number, and it held, and then it started, slow to come down. By 4 in the morning, Ruth was sleeping, cool, breathing right, the crisis broken. And Eli and Cora sat on the floor in the hallway outside her door with their backs against the wall, wrung out, not talking. And then Cora got up without a word and went to the kitchen, and Eli heard the blue pot, and then he smelled eggs. And she cooked. At 4 in the morning, hands still not fully steady, she cooked eggs and toast for the two of them, and they ate it sitting on the kitchen floor because neither of them had the energy to make it to a chair. First meal she cooked just for the two of them. 4 a.m., on the floor, saying nothing, both of them shaking a little as it drained out of them. Eli looked at her across 2 plates on the linoleum. This woman he'd married in 60 seconds, who just walked him through the worst night of the year without ever letting him fall, and he felt something he didn't have a word for and didn't try to find one. He just ate the eggs. He said, "These are good." She said, "They're eggs." And that was, somehow, the closest thing to a love scene either of them had ever been in. He started teaching her his mother after that. The real one, Not the patient, the woman. He got out the photo boxes on a slow evening and showed her Ruth at the lake in 1979. Ruth as a young lunch lady with a whole cafeteria of kids. Ruth on her wedding day, looking like she might bolt. He showed her the recipe box, the cards in his mother's slanted hand, the tuna casserole that half the town had eaten in the 3rd grade. Cora took the casserole card and copied it out for herself, careful. And Eli watched her do it and understood she was doing it so that some piece of Ruth would still exist in a kitchen after. He had to go stand on the porch for a minute after that. Then the wall pushed back. Meridian wasn't done. Their collections arm escalated. First the letters, then the calls, then a certified envelope that Eli signed for at the door with a knot already in his stomach. The lapsed plan denial had rolled downhill into a debt, and the debt had teeth now, a notice of intent to place a lien against the house. Their house. The little rented-turned-mortgage place Ruth had finally bought outright the year before she got sick. The one thing she owned free and clear. The one thing she'd meant to leave her son. Meridian wanted to attach it, for the very care they'd refused to authorize. Eli sat with that certified letter for a long time, and that was when Marcus offered the clean way out. Marcus was Eli's oldest friend and the shop's co-owner. A good man. That was the trouble. He was a genuinely good man, and what he offered came from real friendship, and that made it harder to refuse than if it had been cruel. He took Eli out to the truck one afternoon and laid it out plain. "I've been thinking about your whole situation, and I want to help. I can loan you enough to knock the lien threat down, real terms, no interest between friends. Pay me when you can." "But Eli." He paused. "You got to think about the marriage thing, too. I'm your friend, so I'll say it. If she's covering your mom, and now there's a lien and finances all tangled up between you and a woman you married 3 weeks ago, that gets complicated fast if anything goes wrong. Sell the house, take my loan, clear the debt, and dissolve the marriage before it's a mess you can't undo. Clean, you keep your mom's care going on my dime, you keep your name clear, and nobody can ever say you married for money. That's the sensible play, brother. That's me looking out for you." And the thing was, it was sensible. Every word of it was sensible. It was the safe path, and it had Eli's pride stitched right into it. No more whispers, no more Randy Kesslers, no owing a strange woman anything. Back inside the walls he understood. Marcus wasn't wrong that it was clean. Marcus was only wrong about what clean was worth. Eli took the loan paperwork home. He put it on the kitchen table. He looked at it for 2 days. In those same 2 days, Ruth needed a new prescription, an expensive one, not fully covered even now, a few $100s, and Eli reached for his wallet at the pharmacy counter out of pure reflex, the way he always did, the way that had emptied him all year. And Cora, beside him, just put her card down first. Quiet, no announcement. And Eli's hand stopped halfway to his pocket, and for the first time, the very first time, he let it happen. He didn't fight her for the check. He didn't insist. He didn't do the thing he always did, the pride thing, the I've got it thing. He let her pay for his mother's medicine, and he said, quietly, "Thank you," and he meant it clean, with no shame riding underneath it. It was a small thing at a pharmacy counter. It was also the sound of something cracking in him that had been welded shut his whole life. Cora heard the difference. She didn't look at him. But he saw her almost smile at the card reader, and he knew she'd heard it. That night, he read Marcus's loan paperwork one more time. The sensible path. Sell the house, take the money, dissolve the marriage, keep his name clean. Everything Eli Brandt had wanted 3 weeks ago. A way to stop being carried. He thought about the 4 a.m. eggs on the floor. He thought about Cora's back straight at the sink while Randy talked, and Ruth's voice shutting the room. He thought about the medication grid taped inside the cabinet, and 8 hours of his mother breathing even in the dark. He thought about 2 pairs of hands on a port line at midnight. He thought about the word household and the word wife, and how he'd been saying the second one for 3 weeks like it was a technicality, a form he'd signed. A thing that wasn't real. He picked up Marcus's loan papers, and he tore them in half, and then in half again. And he put the pieces in the trash under the coffee grounds where nobody would fish them out. The next morning he drove to the Meridian Collections office in person. Not the phone. In person. He stood at the counter, and he asked for a manager, and he waited 40 minutes, and when a man in a lanyard finally came out, Eli said the sentence he'd never said, and meant it all the way down. My wife and I are going to handle our family's bills together. You can put that in the file. My wife. First time. Not the nurse. Not the arrangement. Not the technicality. My wife. And he felt the ground go solid under it as he said it, like a bolt he'd finally torqued to spec. He drove home lighter than he'd been in a year, and he didn't know, couldn't have known, that 3 days earlier, in a county office 2 towns over, a plain envelope with no return address had landed on the desk of an investigator named Dana Priest. Inside was a single typed complaint and a copy of a marriage license, and a sentence underlined twice. The hospice nurse married a member of her patient's household. Conflict of interest. Recommend the board review nurse Cora Nilsen's license immediately. Eli walked into the house saying her name, ready, for the first time, to try and say more than that. Cora was at the table, white-faced, a letter in her hand with the county seal on it, and she looked up at him, and every bit of the calm he'd come to lean on was gone from her face. They're investigating me, she said. Eli. They think. They're going to say I married you for. She stopped. She pressed the back of her wrist to her mouth, the way she had at the sink. I could lose my license. And there's something I have to tell you. Something about the money. Before somebody else tells you first. He set the keys down on the table like they might break. He pulled the chair out. He sat, because his legs told him to, and he looked at the county seal on that letter and then at her face above it. Tell me, he said. Cora put the letter down. She flattened it with both hands the way she flattened a bedsheet, out of habit, out of needing her hands to do something honest. There's an account, she said. I told you once, weeks ago. I said it fast so you wouldn't hear it. Money sitting somewhere I've never touched. She swallowed. It's not savings, Eli. It's a settlement. A settlement. Life insurance. Her voice went flat and careful, the nurse voice, the one she used on the worst nights. I had a husband. His name was Tom. And we had a daughter. She was 7 months old. She stopped. She pressed the back of her wrist to her mouth. There was a truck that ran the light out on Route 4. I was on shift. I wasn't in the car. The kitchen went so quiet Eli could hear the refrigerator running. That was 6 weeks before I turned 30, she said. The money came 4 months after. And I have never spent $1 of it. Not one. Because spending it felt like her hands opened over the letter. Like selling them. Like agreeing they were gone, and here's what they were worth. So it just sat there. 22 years I've been a nurse, and I have never once let myself need anything, and that money just sat in a bank being the proof that they existed. Eli didn't move. He was doing the thing he did with an engine that wouldn't turn over, listening for the part that was wrong. Then I met your mother, Cora said, and your mother is the first person in a long time who looked at me like I was a person and not a uniform. And then Meridian did what Meridian did, and there was a hole, and I had money that had been sitting there for years killing me slowly by just existing. She looked up at him. Her eyes were dry, and that was worse than tears. So I married you. And I put that money toward keeping Ruth alive. And for the first time since the light on Route 4, I could breathe. You paid, Eli said. Slow, the gap. The infusion. That wasn't the coverage. The coverage bought us time. The account bought the rest. She didn't look away. I've been paying down the $47,200 owed a piece at a time so you wouldn't see it hit all at once. So you wouldn't do exactly the thing you're doing right now with your face. He stood up. He didn't decide to. The chair scraped. I didn't do this for you, she said. and her voice cracked on the last word, the only crack in the whole thing. That's what I need you to hear before the board says it ugly. I didn't marry you out of pity. I did it so I could breathe. And Eli, who read every gift as a debt, who had sold a '78 shovelhead he'd rebuilt with his own 2 hands rather than take a dime he hadn't earned. Eli heard the one word he was built to hear wrong. Pity. You bought my mother's life, he said, with your dead family's money. Her face didn't break. It closed, like a door easing shut in a house where somebody's sleeping. That's not what I said. It's what happened. His voice wasn't loud. That was the awful part. It was quiet and even and final. The voice of a man torquing a bolt he already knew was stripped. You had money you couldn't touch, and you found a family broke enough to let you touch it. And now there's a letter with a seal on it saying you married a patient's son, and every single person in this town who called it an insurance scam gets to be right. Eli, Randy gets to be right. His cousin's name came out of him like a stone. The whole Sunday table gets to be right. He looked at the letter, at the word investigation, at her name typed under it. They're going to take your license. Because of me. Because of us. And there's no us. There never was. There was a hole and money and a form on this table. Cora stood too then. Slow. She was steadier than he was, and she always had been, and he hated it in that moment, because it meant she'd known this was coming and he hadn't. You went to the collections office 3 days ago, she said, and you called me your wife. I did. And meant it. I did. His throat worked. And it doesn't matter, because now there's a man named Dana Priest going through your bank records, and every proof I could give him looks exactly like the crime they're accusing you of. A nurse. Her patient's household. A settlement she spent on them. Cora. He said her name and it came apart in his mouth. If I stay, I hang you. The only clean thing I can do is not be here. Don't, she said. Don't you dare protect me by leaving. I have buried enough people who left. But he was already moving. He was already taking the truck keys back off the table where he'd just set them down. I'll be at the shop, he said. Marcus has the cot in the back. You keep the house. You keep... He couldn't finish it. He looked at the stove, where the blue enamel coffee pot sat with its dent and its white speckles. The pot Ruth had bought in 1979 and made Thursday coffee in for a stranger who turned out not to be one. You keep taking care of her. Please, that part was always real. And he walked out the door of the house he'd sworn to nobody but himself he'd fight for. And he left his wife standing in the kitchen holding a letter, and the worst thing he ever did in his life he did, believing it was the decent one. He slept on the cot behind the shop for 11 nights. He knew because he counted. He was a man who counted. $47 once, on a kitchen table, the 3rd time through. Now he counted nights on a cot, with the smell of diesel and cold coffee, and he told himself the space he was making was mercy. Ruth knew better within a day. She always knew. She'd known when he was 6 and lying about the window. She'd known when he sold the shovelhead, and told her he was tired of it, and she knew now. Lying propped in the bed, Cora had angled just right so her lungs didn't fill. She let 2 days go by. On the 3rd, she told Cora to call her son and tell him his mother wanted to see him, and to say it just like that, mother, so the boy couldn't say no. He came at 11:30 at night after his double, still in his coveralls, diesel under his nails. The lamp was on low. The room smelled like the eucalyptus lotion Cora rubbed into Ruth's feet, and under it, the deeper smell, the one Eli had learned to stop naming. On the windowsill, where the light caught it, sat the blue coffee pot. Cora had carried it in from the kitchen. Ruth liked to see it, she'd said. It reminded her of mornings. Cora stood in the doorway. She didn't come in. She didn't leave either. Sit down, Ruth said, and her voice was a thread now, but the iron was still in it. The same iron that had told him to sit down at this whole thing months ago from another doorway. You've been sleeping on a cot. Ma, on a cot. Behind a shop, a grown man. She patted the blanket. Her hand was all bones and papery skin, and he took it, and it was cold, and he covered it with both of his the way she used to cover his. You want to tell me why? I'm protecting her, Eli said. Her license. If I'm not in the house, the board can see it wasn't. Stop not loud. She didn't have loud left. But it landed. You're not protecting her, Elias. You never once in your life protected anybody by leaving them. You're protecting you. You cannot stand to be carried. She said it plain, the way you'd read a diagnosis off a chart. You sold that motorcycle so you wouldn't have to take help. You tore up Marcus's papers so you wouldn't owe him. And now a woman loves you enough to spend the only thing she had left of her babies to keep me breathing. And you'd rather run to a cot than let that be a gift. Because a gift means somebody sees you're not enough on your own. And you would rather die than be seen that way. The refrigerator wasn't running in here. There was nothing to hear but her breath and the lamp's little buzz. She didn't pity you, Ruth said. She chose you. There's a whole world of difference, and you're too proud to walk across it. Eli looked down at his mother's hand in his. She told me she did it so she could breathe, he said. Not for me. Good, Ruth's mouth moved. It was almost the old smile. You don't want a woman who loves you because you're pitiful. You want one who loves you because loving you finally let her live again. That's not less, you fool. That's the whole thing. That's the only kind worth having. She turned her head, slow, toward the doorway, toward Cora standing there with her arms wrapped around herself. Come here, honey, Cora came. She knelt by the bed on the side away from Eli, and Ruth freed her hand from her son's and reached for the nurses, and for a moment the old dying woman held them both, one in each hand, over the blanket. You take the coffee pot, Ruth said to Cora, when I'm gone. It's not much. It's got a dent and it's older than both of you. Her thumb moved over the back of Cora's hand. I bought it the year I married his father. I made coffee in it every morning for 22 years until he passed, and then I made it for one, and I hated the sound of it. 1 cup. Her eyes were wet now, and she let them be. You make it for the whole house, you hear me? Don't you ever make coffee for one. Promise me. I promise, Cora whispered. And you. Ruth's eyes came back to Eli, and there was no iron in them now, only a mother running out of time to fix her son. You stop counting. $47, 21 days, 11 nights on a cot. You've been counting your whole life to make sure nobody could say you took more than you gave. Baby, that's not a life. That's a ledger. Her breath caught and settled. Love isn't a debt. Nobody's keeping score but you. Put the pencil down. He couldn't answer. He put his forehead against the back of her hand instead, the way he had when he was small, and he felt her other hand come up, shaking, and rest on his hair. She died a little after 4 in the morning, in the full house, with the lamp on and both of them holding her, and the blue coffee pot catching the first gray light on the sill. She wasn't afraid. He'd been afraid for a year that she'd be afraid, and she wasn't, and that was the last gift she gave him. The board hearing was set for a Tuesday, 2 weeks after they buried her. Eli almost didn't go. He'd moved back into the house, the cot didn't make sense with her gone, and the house was too quiet not to share. But he and Cora moved through it like two people at the same funeral. Careful, apart, she was preparing to face the board alone. She'd hired nobody. I'll tell them the truth, she said, and they'll do what they do. She said it the way she said everything now, level and used up. He drove to the county building because he couldn't not. It was a fluorescent room 2 towns over, off Route 4, the same road, and he made himself not think about that. A long table. A county seal on the wall. Dana Priest sat in the middle with a folder squared in front of him. A gray man with a gray tie who looked like he'd never once in his life torn up a piece of paper he was supposed to sign. To his left, a woman from Meridian with a laptop open and a lanyard. The same kind of lanyard as the man who'd said my wife back to Eli across a counter. Folding chairs faced the table. Marcus was in one of them, ball cap in his hands. Randy was in another, which Eli hadn't expected and didn't understand until later. Deb the clerk. The pastor. Half of Sunday's table come to watch the ending of the thing they'd named the beginning of. Cora sat alone at a small table facing the board. She had a folder too. Hers held her license and nothing else. Priest read the complaint into the record in a voice with no weather in it. Anonymous Type A hospice nurse married a member of her patient's household. Conflict of interest. He read the dates. He noted the settlement, the transfers, the marriage license with 60 seconds of ceremony and no ring. He laid it out clean and cold, and every fact he stated was true. And every true fact made it sound exactly like what the whole town had said it was. Nurse Nilsen, Priest said, the board's concern is straightforward. Did you enter into this marriage to gain financial access to your patient's care? Or to move personal funds through a household in a way that exploited a professional relationship? You may respond. Cora stood. She opened her mouth. And Eli was on his feet before she got a word out. I'd like to say something, he said. Priest looked at him over the folder. And you are? Eli Brandt, her husband. His voice didn't shake. He was surprised by that. The son of the patient. Ruth Brandt. She passed 2 weeks ago. I'm the household you're investigating. So investigate me. Mr. Brandt, this hearing concerns your wife's professional conduct, not. You want to know if she loved my mother for money? Eli said, and he was walking now, up to the little rail between the chairs and the table, and he set something down on it. A receipt. Faded, soft at the folds. This is $47. It's what was on our kitchen table the night this started. I'd counted it 3 times because I make good money turning wrenches, and it still wasn't a fraction of what my mother's next infusion cost. Meridian had lapsed her plan over a $61 premium that came due on the 3rd, and they read the denial to me over a speakerphone while 6 people stood in line behind me. 21 days, they said. Then they stopped the chemo. The room was silent. The Meridian woman's fingers had stopped over her keys. This woman, he couldn't say her name yet, or he'd lose it, so he pointed. She sat with my mother on Thursdays, made her coffee in a blue pot. And when the wall came down, she slid a marriage form across that same table and said, no strings, I'll sleep on the couch. And I said no, because I'm a man who sells his motorcycle before he takes a handout. He put a second thing on the rail beside the receipt. A sheet of paper, taped and folded and taped again, block letters on it. This is the medication schedule she wrote out and put inside my mother's cabinet door. That's her handwriting at 2 in the morning. This isn't a woman moving money through a household. This is a woman who learned to run my mother's port line and taught me to do it too. Who cooked for 3 of us at 4 in the morning after a fever nearly took Ma, and we ate it standing up because none of us could sit. He turned to Priest. You've got her bank records. You know about the settlement. Her husband and her baby girl killed on this road. This exact road. The one your building sits on. You know she never spent a cent of it for over 20 years because spending it meant admitting they were gone. And then she spent it on my mother. His jaw worked. You're calling that a conflict of interest. I'm telling you it's the least conflicted thing I've ever seen a person do. She didn't do it for me. She told me that to my face and I was too proud and too stupid to hear it right. She did it so she could breathe again. And I ran. I moved out. I slept on a cot behind my shop for 11 nights because I couldn't stand to be loved for free. Marcus, in the folding chairs, went very still. Randy was looking at the floor. So here's my testimony. Eli put both hands flat on the rail. You investigated whether she married my mother for money. Investigate me instead. Because I married her back, Not on paper. I did that at the start under duress, and I'll admit it. I married her back the day I stopped counting. And I love her for nothing. I've got nothing. My mother's gone. My savings are gone. I gave away the last thing I owned that had two wheels. I've got nothing, and loving her is the truest thing I've ever owned. You can't put that on your laptop, ma'am. He looked at the Meridian woman. There's no line for it. Nobody spoke. A fluorescent tube buzzed somewhere in the ceiling. Then, Priest did something Eli didn't expect. He opened the folder wider, and he turned 2 pages, and he looked at the Meridian representative. The complaint was anonymous, Priest said. Typed, no return address. My office traced the metadata as a matter of course. He let it sit. It originated from a workstation registered to Meridian Health Assurance's collections division, the same division that filed a lien against the Brandt property, the same division whose denial is the reason there was a gap to fill in the first place. He closed the folder. You'll forgive the board, but a complaint about a conflict of interest tends to carry less weight when it comes from the party that stood to collect on the house. The Meridian woman started to speak. Our records indicate the plan lapsed on your records, Priest said, are going to be reviewed by someone above my pay grade before the week is out. Given that a $61 premium appears to have retroactively voided a cancer patient's coverage and generated a $47,200 balance, I'd close the laptop. She closed the laptop. Priest looked at Cora, then at Eli. Something in the gray man's face moved, just slightly, the way a heavy door moves when you finally get the hinge oiled. Nurse Nilsen. The marriage predates any change in your patient's care plan by a matter of days, and its authenticity is a dry pause. And Eli would swear later there was the ghost of dry humor in it, not seriously in question given the last 5 minutes. The board finds no professional misconduct. The complaint is struck. He drew a single line through something on the page. 1 line. It made no sound, and Eli heard it anyway. There's one more question the board is required to ask, Priest said, for the record, given the nature of the complaint. He folded his hands. Nurse Nilsen. Do you wish to remain married to Mr. Brandt? You may answer simply. Cora had not sat back down. She stood at her little table with her folder and her 1 license inside it, and she looked across the folding chairs at the man in coveralls, with diesel under his nails, who had counted $47.11 nights, and finally put the pencil down. She said 1 word. Stay, not a yes to the board. A word to him. The only word. And Eli crossed the room, past Marcus and past Randy, and past the Meridian woman, closing her laptop. And he stopped in front of her, and he stayed. It was Marcus who found him after, in the parking lot off Route 4, both of them squinting in a sun that had no business being that bright. I brought the loan papers again, Marcus said. In case today went the other way. He held up nothing. His hands were empty. Left him in the truck. Didn't seem like you needed a clean way out anymore. I never did, Eli said. I just couldn't tell the difference between a way out and a way through. Marcus nodded slow. He looked at Cora, who was standing a little off with Deb the clerk, the two of them not quite hugging, the way women hold each other's arms when there aren't words. She's good, Eli, I know it. Took you long enough. I know that too. Randy came over last. He'd been the one at Sunday dinner who said it loud enough for the table. He married the hospice lady for insurance, that's what that is. He stood in front of Eli with his hands jammed in his pockets, and his face doing something it wasn't used to doing. I was wrong, Randy said, at the dinner. I said a thing. He couldn't quite look up. Aunt Ruth chewed me out for it after, right there in the kitchen with the pastor listening. I never forgot it. He scuffed the asphalt. I came today to see if I'd been right. I wasn't. He put out his hand. I'm sorry, cousin. Eli took it. He didn't make him say more. His mother had raised him to know when a man had spent everything he had and to not ask for change. The lien died the way the whole thing did, quietly, in an office he never saw. A different Meridian, a chastened one, reversed the denial under a scrutiny it had brought on itself, and the $47,200 owed got written down to a number Eli could look at without his stomach dropping, and then written down again. And then it was gone. He got the letter on a Tuesday. He read it once. He didn't count anything. He set it on the table and went out to the porch, where his wife was drinking coffee, and he sat down next to her, and that was that. It was about a year later, on a honey-colored afternoon in early fall, that the town came up the front steps carrying covered dishes. The house was theirs now, fully, deed and all. The blue coffee pot lived on the stove where it had always lived, dent and speckles and 1979 and all of it, and Cora made coffee in it every morning for the whole house, never for one, because she'd promised. She was back at the county hospice, 3 towns worth of Thursday nurses reporting to her now, and the settlement. The money that had sat for over 20 years being the proof of a husband named Tom and a daughter 7 months old, the settlement was spent. Every dollar. There was a fund at the county now with Ruth Brandt's name on it. It paid the gap for families the way Cora had paid it for Ruth, so nobody else's mother got a speakerphone and a countdown of days. The first letter of thanks from the fund had come that week. It sat on the porch table under a mason jar, so the breeze wouldn't take it. A woman 2 counties over. Her father. 6 weeks he'd have missed without it. 6 weeks turned into a Christmas. They came up the steps one after another, the neighbors who'd whispered. Deb brought a pie. Randy brought his wife and a casserole that was, Eli noted, tuna, made off a recipe card that had somehow migrated out of Ruth's box and around the family, and he had to go inside for a minute over that one. The pastor came. Marcus came with his boy on his shoulders. They set the dishes down on the long porch, and somebody laughed at something, and the sound of it filled a house that had been so quiet it hurt, and Cora stood in the door of it with a dish towel over her shoulder and watched her husband be surrounded by the exact people who'd called their marriage a fraud, all of them proven wrong, all of them fed. Eli came and stood behind her. He put his chin on the top of her head. Down on the table, the letter from the fund ruffled under its jar. "You know what I keep thinking," he said, "about Meridian. The whole thing. They said the plan lapsed on the 3rd. $61. He shook his head slow. The plan never lapsed. Their decency did. That's the only thing that ever went past due." Cora reached up and squeezed his forearm, the one with the shop scar, and didn't say anything, because after a while, you don't have to. At the end of the afternoon, when the light had gone long and gold and most of the dishes were empty, Cora took the blue coffee pot off the stove and filled it and set it to warm, and she got down the cups. She poured for the whole porch. Then she poured 2 more and set them on the little table by the empty rocker at the end, the one nobody sat in, the one they left be. 2 cups. One for a woman who bought a coffee pot in 1979 and hated the sound of it making coffee for one. And beside it, one more, left to go cold on purpose, for a husband and a baby girl who'd been gone 22 years and were, at last, not a debt she was keeping, but a life she'd finally let herself live. Love isn't what you can cover. Eli understood that now, all the way down, torque to spec. It isn't the money, and it isn't the ledger, and it isn't the count of what you gave against what you took. It's who stays. It's the second cup. It's making coffee for the whole house, every morning, on purpose, till you can't. If you got all the way to the end of this one, do me a favor and comment the city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels.